All right, so welcome everybody. My name is Frederic Cote, and I'm a technical trainer here at Coveo, and welcome to Basic Analytics. So in this class, we will talk a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with the Coveo platform. I hope that most of you or all of you have followed my Coveo fundamental training, at least to be able to situate what we're going to do in the big picture of what is Coveo. If you haven't, don't worry. I designed this class to be able to be accessible by everybody, even though if you haven't followed fundamentals. And always remember, you can watch Fundamental for free on our support portal. Now, I pasted in the GoToTraining chat box, I pasted a link for the class materials. So the slide I will be using, if you want to download them, you simply go to this Google Drive address. And if there's any modification that I need to do in the slide, I will update it and put it back into this folder. So you will always have the most up-to-date slides. All right. So a little bit about this course. So the goal of this course is really to provide you with a detailed overview of all the tools at your disposal is usage analytics, how they work, what's the big picture, and what you can do with them. And of course, this class is really an introduction to all the tools of usage analytics, because usage analytics is a really in-depth topic. That's why we have basic and intermediate, and we'll have even additional intermediate class in the future. So new classes coming probably in Q2 or Q3 of this year's. So the duration of the class is about 4 hours spread over 2 sessions. Of course, I say more or less 4 hours. It depends on how many questions I receive and the type of interaction that we have with one another. We're quite a large group today. We have 18 people scheduled, and we have 11 so far. So some housekeeping before we continue. The format of this class is really a mix of presentation and demonstration. There's no lab per se, so you can just sit down and enjoy the show. And of course, if you can ask me questions at any moment that you want. Sometime I will answer them right on the spot, and other time I will simply say I'll get to you in a minute. And if I don't have the answer from top of my head when you're asking it, please you rest assured I will make a follow-up after the class in a follow-up email that everybody will see with all the questions that were asked. And of course, if you were wondering, you will receive a link for the recording of the session if you want to rewatch it, or maybe if you have to leave and come back at another time, you will also receive a list. So of course, the best way. One last thing, if possible, please make sure that you mute your microphone. This is just for everybody's convenience. Of course, you can ask me questions by voice, no problem, but just make sure that if you're not talking, mute your microphone for everybody's comfort. So once again, if you have questions, you can ask them either in the chat box or vocally. Of course, the chat box might be a bit more efficient since we're a larger group, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Okay. So if there's any question, you can ask them. But for now, let me talk about the big picture. So this course in 3 big ideas. And I always prefer to start with the big picture, and then we go into details so you know which parts, how each parts relate to one another, and you are always able to put things in context. So this course is about a simple idea, and the simple idea is that when people are making a query, they're getting result back, and that's probably why you purchased Coveo in the first place. However, the idea behind Coveo is not to provide search; it's really to provide relevance in every interaction. So to make sure that every time someone is interacting with your content, they're finding exactly what they're looking for. This is what we mean by relevance. So this course is about this idea of relevance and the tool at your disposal to get there. If you follow Coveo fundamentals, you are probably familiar with this. It's the Coveo relevancy maturity model, or how at Coveo, since we are relevance expert, we situate that to get the most out of your investment out of Coveo, you need to go through 6 different steps to improve your relevance. So you start by having everything secured in the same format, the same place. Then you start providing that content in a unified and empowering content navigation. If you already play with a Coveo search page, you know what I mean. You have a lot of search as a user. You have a lot of way to control your experience with facets, sorts, tab, just to name a few. This is where the stunt. But that's for developers. That's for administrators. That's for developer. That's not what interests us as business analysts, right? We're in a basic analytic class. We want to play with analytics. So once you have the content navigation in place, you'll start getting data, and we'll return to that. What do I mean by data, and what kind of data do we have at our disposal? But once the navigation is in place, you can start playing with tuning the relevance. So you're seeing some patterns that your user are doing. Maybe you want to improve them manually for your by yourself. And then as we move from step 4, 5 to 6, we're entering the realm of learning. So trying to use automation feature to really leverage all the data that we have on our user to create automation, to automate relevance, and to try to predict what your user will need next. So what's really nice about this model is that it ties perfectly to the big feature of the Coveo platform. Once again, if you watch Fundamental, you know about this pitch, is that each of these steps can be tied to a specific feature of the Coveo platform. And in this class, we're really going to see those that are related to analysts. So once again, we won't talk about indexing, connectors, and building a search interface. In this class, we're assuming that your search interface is already in place and you are here to learn more about how to understand what your user are doing. So this class and 3 big ideas. So like I said, this class is really about showing you the tools that at your disposal as analysts to provide relevance in every interaction that your audiences will have with your content. Maybe you're using Coveo on your customer portal, on your e-commerce site, on a community, or maybe all 3 at the same time. So in this class, we'll discuss what are the tools at your disposal as analysts to not only to do 3 things. First, we'll see the tools at your disposal to understand what matters to your visitor. What are they doing on the search page? What keywords are they using? What are they doing? Can we see seeing patterns, right? We're talking, of course, about dashboards and reports. The second type of tool we're going to see is the tools that help you to act as analysts, to take action to help your visitor find what's relevant to them. And of course, one of the most common example is that you're observing, using the tools to understand. So using your reports, you're observing that a lot of people are making queries not using the right terms. So maybe you would like to put some synonym in. If a user search for A, instead search for B. And this is what we mean by tool to act to help your visitor improve the relevance of their experience. And we'll see all of the tools at your disposal as analysts, and we'll dig down into most of them and keep the other more advanced for intermediate analytics. And finally, the third type of tools we're going to see in this class is really the tool of automation. So we're talking about machine learning and how you can leverage all the big data that your Coveo platform is gathering on everybody who is coming to your search interface. And how a machine learning that can learn from these interaction and really help people, like for example, giving query suggests or rearranging the search result only to provide the most relevant result depending on who's the user. And we're going to have an overview of all of this. So these are the 3 big ideas behind this class. And why 3 big ideas? It's because it's really about the cycle. So it's the cycle of relevance, like the cycle of life. If you already work with one of our customer success manager, you might have already be familiar with this. So the first step is that first you understand what matters to your user, you understand what they're doing, you try to understand the patterns, what are the keywords, and what are the trends that you can observe. And then from these trends, you will start acting. So you will act using the tools of the platform to try to optimize the experience. It might be creating synonym, might be creating boosting, or putting result at the top of the search result for different queries. All of these actions that you can do by yourself to really help your visitor finding what they're looking for. And finally, of course, acting is great. However, as we'll see, some tasks can be quite tedious, like constantly looking in the data to see what are the best results for possible queries. As a human, that can be a very tedious and time-consuming process. So this is why we have automation. This is why we have machine learning. So machine learning are the set of tools that will allow you to automatically rearrange result to provide your user with what's the most relevant, and also provide them with suggestion of possible queries. So exactly as you do when you go on Google, you start typing something, and Google start recommending possible queries that you can make from what you're typing. This is exactly the same thing. However, you can also deploy this on your content with the Coveo platform. So let's go a bit deeper in the big ideas just to situate them. So big idea number 1, understand. So when you have a Coveo search interface, and of course, you've probably seen some of the demos, you can have a Coveo search interface in basically anything. And some of our clients have even installed Coveo inside their own product. So if you're interested about this, go on Coveo.com. We have pretty good use cases about this from a very famous software manufacturer. So when a user, so the usually flow, what happens when your user use a search interface is that they send queries, so question to find content, and then they get result back. However, there's another thing that happens at the same time is that each time a user interact with your search interface, there's a bunch of metadata that are gathered, and we call that events. So what kind, of course, you might be wondering, so what kind of metadata? Well, by default, any interface built with the Coveo framework will trigger an event each time a visitor interact with the page. So a trigger for an event can either be a search event, so someone is loading a new search result, typing for something, they're using a facet, they're using a tab, so that's a search event. Or they click on something, they click on a search result. That also trigger a usage analytic event that contains a lot of metadata. And finally, if you are fancy or you have a developer team who put that in place for you, you can also perform any operation you can think of. If a user goes on your page and does 3 cycles with their mouse, if you have a good developer, they could find a way to figure that out, and then you would have an event, and that event would be, of course, custom made, but that could be a user made 3 circles with their mouse. I don't know why you would want to measure that, but it's possible if you have, of course, if you want to customize this. So to give you an idea, really the metadata is really what helps us answer questions like, who is the visitor? On which search interface were they? Have they made any query? What kind of result did they get? On what document? If they click on anything, on what document did they click? And is there any document that are not clicked? Is there any queries that return no results? That kind of question. So really, what's interesting about this is what's next. You might be wondering, okay, Frederick, this is really nice. My search page is sending all of this data, but why should I care? Well, it's because all of this data is leveraged by the platform to create reports and dashboards. So this is what helps you understand the patterns, what your visitors are doing, what they're clicking on, who they are, and answer all that sort of question that as analysts, of course, you are very, very interested in. So this feature, so the big idea about understanding, it's understanding the relationship between the events and the report. Sorry. So of course, before we can talk about report, it will be fundamental that you understand the mechanics behind it. So how reports are compiled and what are the building blocks behind this report. These are called events, and we'll have a module on this to discuss really these fundamental and these key concepts. Big idea number 2 is that, okay, so I talk about the query flow. So the query goes in the cloud and then goes back as rank result. But actually, it's a bit more complicated. It's a bit more sophisticated than that. Before being transformed into search result, the query makes a stop at something called the query pipeline. And the query pipeline is really what enables you to fine-tune the search experience. For example, let's say one of your users is using this keyword, is making a query for crypto pesos. I don't know for you, but I'm a big fan of cryptocurrency, but crypto pesos, that might not be very relevant. I might not have a lot of content about crypto pesos in my index. However, I do have a lot of stuff about cryptocurrency. So what I could do, I could use a feature of the query pipeline to turn this crypto pesos query into cryptocurrency. So using a synonym to swap the two, thus making sure that my end user is having a more relevant experience. So what are query pipelines? It's really, you just have to remember this picture right here, right? The query pipeline is really the place where the query has to stop before being transformed into search results. So a query comes in, goes into this query pipeline box there, and this is where you can interact with it as analysts. Of course, there's other way to interact with a query, but that's for developer, that's for administrator. That doesn't interest us right now. And then this is where, and then once the query leaves this query pipeline conceptual box, it is entering something called the index and is turned into search results. So of course, the process of turning a query into search result is managed automatically. However, you do have some control over this process using query pipeline. And this is really the feature that enables you to act on what you have observed in your reports. So first you go in your report, you observe some patterns, you say people are searching a lot for crypto pesos, but they're not finding anything. So I'm going to act on this. I'm going to create a synonym that will transform crypto pesos into cryptocurrency because I got a lot of content about cryptocurrency. And that's probably what they're looking for anyway. And this notion is really tied back to helping people finding what they're looking for, what is relevant to them. So a few things that you can do with query pipelines, not to steal too much of my thunder when we talk about query pipeline, but you create synonym like this one, crypto pesos for cryptocurrency. You can create feature results. So if somebody search for a specific keyword, one result will be automatically placed at the top of the search result no matter what. So you can think about really good use case would be for products. So if you have a e-commerce site and people are searching for a specific keyword and you want your most recent product to be displayed at the top, simply use that. We're hearing a bit of background noise. Can everybody make sure that the microphone hears something, someone typing? Okay, thank you. Okay. And of course, how that work? We create rules, and so how that work is that we use rules. So rules is really something like a synonym, a feature result, or something that will affect ranking. And a condition is what controls this rule to be fired. So, sorry, we're still hearing. Am I crazy? Do a random test. Okay, apologies for this. Okay. All right, let us continue. Okay, and we'll talk more about this notion of query pipeline when we go into module 4. Okay, and the third big idea, automation. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all of that. And how does that relate to a search context? Well, here we have now that we know that when the query, when a user has a question, they use a query, and that query leaves the search page and contains the keywords. Then it enters a place called the query pipeline, goes into the index, and gets returned into rank result. Well, that's really nice. But we also learned that whenever that happens, whenever the cycle of query and result happens, there's also an event that is fired and is stored somewhere. And let's call it the usage analytic database, because this is where it goes. And we also know there's another feature in Coveo, very, very big feature of Coveo, that is called machine learning. So how does that work and how does this play? The big idea is as follows. We use all the data inside the usage analytic database. So everything that your user have ever did, we use that and we compile what we call machine learning models. So the machine learning is learning from the patterns from your visitors. So when a query comes in, what it happens is that it gets forks in two. One goes through the query pipeline, and the other one is sent to machine learning. And machine learning will analyze it, run its complex algorithm, and finally come out with a solution and will return its prediction to the index. So machine learning is really the intermediate that will tune the query based on what it observed in the patterns and add it to what is to be sent to the index and transform it to search result. So if you're confused, just let me know. This notion here is explained a bit more into intermediate analytics, but I want you to understand the big picture, right? The big picture is that we have a lot of big data that is gathered by the Coveo platform on what your users are doing, and we're using that to compile machine learning. And machine learning, it's not magical, it's not a mystical beast, it's really something that will look at the patterns in all of your data and add it as a recommendation. So maybe machine learning will say, you know what, this result about this new product should be ranked higher than this one. Here's my recommendation. Add this to everything, and then this get transformed into search results. If you're interested more about this, you can ask your question. Of course, right now, it's a bit of a black box. The user's interface for usage machine learning is we'll see more about this when we talk about machine learning, but you'll see as of now, there's a lot of things that you can do with machine learning, and it requires a lot of legwork and work with one of our CSM, and we're working on a way to make it a bit more user-friendly. So when you have with the usage analytic event that you're gathering from your search interface, you gather a lot of information and with a lot of different dimensions. So maybe a single click can have like 20 different dimensions, so 20 different metadata attached to it. So say hello to big data. So the machine learning feature is really what put that big data to work and is able to find patterns of what matters to your visitor, what are they doing and what matters to them. And that allows you to build models to, for example, provide query suggestion or tune the relevance, rearrange the search result based on what is the most relevant at the top and the least at the bottom, and automatically does that for you. So Like I said, it allows you to automatically provide your user with the most relevant result, proactively suggest what would be the best keyword for a given query, and of course, the crown jewel is to provide recommendation of what they could be interested in next. So if you think about recommendation, think of it as when you go on Amazon and you have your product, and just underneath it, you have this nice, I'll say, scroll box that says, you bought this product, or you watch this product, you probably be interested in these. This is this notion of what you see is what you need next. So this is also what you can do with recommendation. Now I don't want to get your hope too high. We're not going to talk about recommendation in this class because that requires a lot of setup from a developer in order to get there. But don't worry, if you have question or interest in recommendation or setting up recommendation in your environment, just let me know. I can put you in contact with the right people, most likely your customer success manager. Okay, so going back to the tools at our disposal, so the tools of the platform. So as you probably guessed by now, this class will be about these three sets. To understand things, you need usage analytics. You need this gap between the content navigation and the tunable relevance. But once you get this insight from usage analytics, this is where you can start to act. You can start using the query pipeline feature to really start tuning the relevance, add in synonym, feature result, and other stuff that we're going to see together in this class. And finally, once we're familiar with what we can do manually, we'll talk about what we can automate. So what we can do automatically, like rearranging the search result, providing automatic boosting to search result using machine learning, and also providing query suggests. And of course, when we'll talk about machine learning, we'll also talk about what's important, like as an analyst. So how can you compare if machine learning is doing a good job? We'll also be able to answer this question when we talk about machine learning. So let's review the plan for this class. So we talk about the big picture, and now there's 4 more modules for us to go on. The first one will be about the key concept behind usage analytics, and we'll really go into some details about the different tools inside the platform at your disposal. We'll talk about tools that you can use to build reports, and also how reports are built. So you remember before I say that in order to really master report building in Coveo, you need to be able to understand the relationship between usage analytic events, and we'll see about what's an event, how to look at it, and how it's shaped, and what's inside your report. So we'll create this relationship. And once we're familiar with the underlying concept, the different filtering at our disposal, and the different how usage analytics events are shaped and how they work, then we'll go into understanding, and I will show you how to build report, how to build dashboard, inside a demo Coveo environment. And then once we have our dashboard, we'll look at them. We'll see a few things. We'll see how they work. We'll ask your question, and then we will move into the query pipeline. So really, how to act to modify the search experience. And finally, at the end, once we're familiar with how we can act manually, we'll see how we can automate this whole process with machine learning. So, if you have any question, you can ask them, and if not, we will get started with the key concepts. So, basic knowledge about usage analytics. I say under stress. Sorry, I'm French Canadian, so sometimes there's a few English words that escape my grasp. So I cannot emphasize enough that this module is really the most important one. Once you understand these concepts, it will make your life much easier when you build your report, because you will be able to understand why you're seeing this on your report. Oh yeah, that's because there's an event behind it, or that's because my events are shaped that way. And this entire class was built working very closely with the customer success manager and from field experience. So there's a lot of traps in here that I'm preventing you to fall into. So pay attention to this module. You will avoid a few traps in the future. Okay, so the big picture, I always start I'm a big fan of starting big and then going into the details, and this module is no exception. So we'll start by having a big picture once again about how it works. So we know that when a query leaves the search interface, search results are returned. That's pretty much why you have a search engine, right? You query, you get results. However, in Coveo platform, there's also something else that happened. We call that event. So regardless if a user is clicking on the result is using a facet, is clicking on a query suggest, is sending a query, or even typing something in the search box, all of this data is gathered into the form of an event and sent to the usage analytics. And of course, this is stored in the usage analytic database. And we use this data for 2 things. Number 1 is, of course, building reports. Or report are the usage analytic events are the foundation of reports, and they are also the foundation of the machine learning models that will allow you to automate the entire relevance discovery improving process in your organization. So, what's a usage analytic event? So, pretty good question. So by default, Coveo search interface. Let's say you build everything out of the box. Out of the box, every time a user search or click on something, an event will be fired. Okay, but then again, what's an event? I think it's very useful to, an event is a record of what happened. And I think it's very useful. It makes things much simpler to just picture it as a table. And to give you, and now the jargon is very important. So on the left side, you have the dimension. So the dimension, think of them as static. The dimension don't change unless your developer create new ones, right? So dimension like action cost device, which is the type of device you're using while you trigger this event. Country is the country where you're from. Origin 1, origin 2 is origin 1 is the name of your search page. Origin level 2 is the name of your tab. If you're not familiar with these terms, you can ask your question, or maybe you are. And in intermediate analytics, I go into, in this class, we won't go into too much depth about what each dimension means. That's for intermediate analytics. Now we'll just focus on the big picture. So dimension is really static, and values will change depending on what happened, the event, who's the user. So in this case, this event right here was fired by someone using a desktop. But if the same person would use a mobile phone, well, then it would be mobile instead of desktop. And if that person was in Spain and not in Canada, well, then country would be Spain, not Canada, and so on. So events contains a lot of information, such as what happened. Was it a search or a click? Where was the user? What page was they using? That's origin level 1. If it was a search, what was the query? What was the text inside the query? What were the keywords that were entered? Like we see here, query text. The query text was game, and etc. So very useful to remind yourself that when we talk about usage analytic event, just see them as tables, and these tables are sent directly into the cloud. Okay. So events record the action that the user has taken on the search interface, and there's 3 types of them out of the box, of course. Search events are triggered whenever a user performs a search action, and we'll see this can be decideful. I want you to remember, when we talk about search, every single time a search result is loaded, that's a search. So when you click on a facet, when you click on a tab, when you click on a sort, all of these are considered to be search because it loads a new set of search results. And we'll come back to this in the demo that is coming up. Click event, they're triggered whenever a visitor clicks on a result. So when there's a result list, and when someone clicks on a result, that's considered a click event. And there's different types of data for click event than from search, obviously. And of course, custom event, they can be programmatically added to your search page and trigger whenever you feel like it. Just as long as you have a developer who knows what he or she is doing, you can have custom event for basically anything. Like you remember that example about running your mouse 3 times in circle? That's feasible, I guess. I'm not a programmer, but maybe someone clever enough would be able to figure how to do it. So I talk a lot about an event, and I know this might be a little bit abstract. So if you want to follow along with this demo, what I'm going to do something a bit technical. I'm going to show you what an event, usage analytic event looks like as it's going out of a search page. And for this, I will be using something called the Chrome Developer Console. If you're not familiar with this, that's perfectly fine. In this class, you don't really need to know how to master it. I'm showing it to you, and I'm giving you the instruction right here if you want to try it out. However, know that if you're taking intermediate analytics, we'll be using that a lot. So let's go and see what I mean by this notion that usage analytic events are like tables. So I'm going to switch to my interface, and I'm going to go on the Coveo support portal. So as stated in the instruction, I'm going to right-click on Inspect. And this will open this right here. This is the Chrome Developer Console. And this one right here, what I'm about to show you, is really helpful to answer one question that Coveo support gets all the time. How do I know that I have usage analytic on my page? Well, this is how you check it out by yourself. It takes only a few seconds, and if you open the support ticket, this is exactly what they'll do. So let's say I will go to Network. I'll make sure to select XHR right here and search for anything. Let's say Salesforce. Okay, there's a lot of events that were triggered right here. So the one that I'm really interested in start like this: searches.
We can't see your screen. You're not sharing.
Really? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Is it better? Not sharing your screen, not sharing your screen.
We still see your demo. We don't see your browser.
Oh, gee. Oh, apologies for that. Let me see. Screen number 2. Do you see the PowerPoint now? Okay, you should be seeing the PowerPoint. Is this the case?
Yes, we're seeing the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you. And now do you see the search page?
Yes, now we see it.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess there was a few settings on my brand new Mac machine, so thank you everybody for the feedback. So let me just start over again, okay? So for the benefits of the demo, let me just start over again. Okay. Yes. Okay. So let me start over again. Here I am on the search page. So like I was saying, I'm using Chrome. You can use any browser, but I'm using Chrome because I consider it to be the best for my very personal reason. So I'm going to right-click anywhere on the page and select Inspect. This will open the developer console. Next, I'll go to Network and make sure I got this XHR selected. And here I will type anything. Like I say, maybe this time it will be Sitecore. So a lot of stuff happened right now in my developer console. What I'm interested in are search events. So I'm going to search because I know that's a search event. And here I am. I got my search.visitor. So of course, this is a HTML response. Don't want to dwell too much about it, but if you go at the bottom, so first of all, this shows right here, you see HTTPS usageanalytic.coveo.com REST. This means that you have usage analytic on your page because this page is sending sending traffic to this address, and this is the address of the Coveo platform for incoming usage analytic event. Does this prove that this page has Coveo usage analytics enabled? Now, the key point behind this demo is to show you this request payload. And inside request payload, you see this. You remember when I told you that it's important to see an event as a table? Here you have it. This is the table I was talking about. Action cause. This one is purple or static, and the one in red will change depending on what I'm typing. So here query text is Sitecore, and remember just a moment ago I searched for Salesforce, so in this case I would have had Salesforce here. And here we added a few custom data because this is a Coveo support community, like this one right here. Won't go into too much details. However, this trick right here, very useful to check if your usage analytic are working first, if they're enabled, if they're working, and what type of data you are sending. Maybe sometime your developers or your administrator will say, oh yeah, I added a new dimension. We'll talk about dimension in just a moment. I added new stuff. And if it's not exiting the page, that means it's not working properly. So the first thing you should do as analyst, if you have any doubts about usage analytic event not being sent to the platform, just do this quick verification. It will save you a support ticket. It will save you at least a week of work. Not at least a week of work, but it will make things much faster for you, and you'll be able to troubleshoot your problem much quicker. Okay, so that's it for the demo. So the key concept. Okay, so key concept about usage analytic event, you fire event and all of them are stored inside the usage analytic database. And once again, very useful to picture it as a, to picture this operation as, to picture an event as a table, because then you are able to relate to it. Oh yeah, it's a table. So on the left side are the variable that are fixed. These are called dimension, and on the right, these are the values, or that will vary depending on what the user is doing. So I just want to show you one more thing about analytic events. The notion that You remember, just to help you distinguish search, you remember I said there's two types of events, search and click out of the box, and you might be wondering what's the difference between them. Of course, it's pretty obvious that when you're typing something into a search box and press enter, that's a search. But there's other things that trigger a search event in the Coveo platform, and it's very important to understand it, and it will also help you better figure out how to leverage the reports. So if I go back to this page, I will keep. So remember, search events are like this. They're named like this. So remember, if I search here, it will create a search. So if I say Salesforce instead, here you go. We have another search event. And if I look here, we have query text Salesforce. Now watch this. If I select any facet, that's also a search. And if I select a tab, that's also a search. You might be wondering why. What's the logic behind it? Well, if you observe apologies, I'm looking for my words. Okay, look at this. If I remove the facet, I get new search result. If I change tab, I get new search result. And if I select this facet, I get another set of search results. This is the idea that search is whenever this result list is loaded again. So whenever you're selecting a facet, a filter here, whenever you're selecting a tab, or whenever you're entering something in the search box or selecting from one of these, that will load a new set of search results, and that's why it's considered to be a search event. Now, of course, why this is useful to you as analysts is that you can say, okay, so probably maybe there's a way, maybe the Coveo platform is smart enough to tell me the difference between someone using the search box and someone using a facet. And yes, we are. We go into more details into this in intermediate analytics. But just to give you a quick spoiler, you see action cause here, facet select. So this helps you as analysts to understand where the search events are coming from, and also helps you tell things like, are people using my facets? Are people using my tabs? Because a lot of the relevance is also about the design of your search page. And if you work with a customer success manager, you'll hear that over and over again. So giving you a quick spoiler, what we see in intermediate analytics, but also to help you more contextualize why there's so many different types of search events. So it's because each time you perform one, the search results are loaded. That's why it's called a search event. And there's ways with the action cause to determine if it was caused by a facet, a tab, or really someone entering something in the search box. And just to give you an idea, there's about 20 different action causes possible for a search to be fired. So a lot of variety. So of course, a lot of depth that you can add to your reportings. Okay. So how does the Coveo platform leverage all these events? Well, the Coveo platform will use all of these events and combine them into dashboards. And this is where the notion of dimension become really useful. So these reports are built with two things, dimensions and metrics. And it's very important to distinguish the two, but we already see what dimensions are, right? So let's dig a little bit deeper. So all events are composed of dimension and their value, and all of that is stored in the usage analytic database. So by default, there's 66 dimensions that are automatically tracked and pre-configured for you. Dimension like action cause that we just saw, query text, and of course other like the country, the device that is used by the visitor, timestamp, of course, and many, many more. What's important? And what's very important to understand at this stage is that it's not because you have it's important to distinguish between a dimension that is available in reports and a dimension that is available inside the Coveo, that is inside the usage analytic database. And what I mean by this is that, once again, this is a trap that we see a lot in Coveo support, is that in order to be available in a report, a dimension must be declared as so. So what do I mean by being declared? Let's go and see this by looking at the dimension table. So you can access the dimension table by going to Admin Console, Analytic Dimensions, and you have two types of dimension. System dimension are those that are created by default, and user dimension are those that you create yourself, so your developer team create. So let me show you what I mean. I hope everybody is seeing my page right now. I switched to another screen, so if you're not seeing it, just let me know. Okay, so Analytics, Dimensions. So here we go. I am in my basic analytic org. I got no dimension that are user defined and all. So what do I mean? So I don't want to go too deep, but you need to understand this at our current level, is that here we have that display name is the name that you have in your report. So you are able to, like I said, dimension is what you use to build reports. So you need to, and these, all of the dimension that we see here are available in reports. And you see that we have two things. We have the display name and the API name. When we're referring to the API name, this is the name inside the usage analytic database. So for a very good example, sometime we get some support ticket of analysts calling saying, hey, my developer created these new dimensions for me and I'm not seeing them and I can't use them in my reports. They're just not available. And that's probably because your developers did a pretty good job. I mean, they created these dimensions, and these dimensions are sent from our page as we saw here. However, the dimensions are not available in reports. So what your developers need to do, and we see that in also in intermediate analytics, is that you need to come here and add dimension and to declare it. But I won't show you the details. This is more admin stuff, but you need to be aware that this exists. It's not because your developer said, I created a new dimension for you. You also must make sure that it's here, because if it's not declared here, there's no way you'll be able to use it in your reports. Now you might be wondering, Frederick, this is a bit confusing, this notion dimension, reports. What do you mean by this? Don't worry. When we'll start building reports, we'll make much more sense about this relationship and what do I mean by a dimension that is declared versus a dimension in the database. Okay, and the concept behind metrics, well, metrics, if dimensions are built from event, metrics are computed by the platform itself, and it's a numerical value for any given dimension, in fact, and we have a bunch of them. Notably counting metrics that will count how many clicks, how many counts, and you can also have our brand new chain metrics, in which you can use two metrics and make a multiplication or a division. If you're interested, just let me know. When I build reports, I will show you what I mean by this. But the key idea is this. Let's say you have metrics are compiled by the Coveo platform. So let's say you have these 4 events, 4 search event and 2 clicks. So once they go into the usage analytic database, and then the Coveo platform will compile them. So for example, we see here that for the dimension query, there's 3 possible. For a given day, there were only 3 queries that were made on our page: Clash, Titan, and Castle. If we look at the event on the left, we can see that Clash was made 2 times by user 1 and user number 3. We can see that Titan was the query Titan was made 1 time by user number 2, and same thing, and Castle was made once by user number 4. And this is what we mean by the query count. And on the other side, we have click count. So how many times the query Clash lead to a click? Once with user 1. And how many times does the query Castle lead to a click? It happened once with user 4. So this is the relationship between metrics and dimension, and I hope you're starting to see why dimension is what you're building your reports on. Dimension like query. Query is probably the most fundamental dimension you'll be reporting on, because query is really what are the keywords that are used by my user. And then from this, you will say, okay, how many time a given query was made? How many time people search for Clash? How many time people search for Titans? Or that sort of stuff. So the big picture, when you put it together, you build something like this. This is called an explorer. And we see on the left, we see in the deep blue, we see the dimension. So dimension query, remember, this doesn't change. This is fixed. The dimension query is fixed. However, here's all the possible values for a given period, all the possible value of the query dimension: Clash, Lobster, Titan, Budget, Finance, etc. And on the right side, we have metrics that we can compile on them. And of course, you can change this. This is entirely customizable, but the set of metrics is fixed. However, how you arrange them is entirely customizable to your taste. So we see here, for example, the query count, so how many times the Clash query were count. How many times did the Clash query led to a click? We can also tell you that. And on average click rank, on average, when the query Clash was made and there was a click, on average, where was the result? So what 2.6 says is that it says that on average, when the Clash query is made and there's a click, on average, it's about in the rank 2.6, so between 2 and 3 in the search results. Okay, so maybe make this a bit more dynamic. So I'm going to show you an Explorer, and we're going to have a look at our first report that you can have in the Coveo platform, just to put this notion of dimension and metrics into perspective. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go here in reports. And these are these reports come already pre-configured for the Coveo platform. I didn't do anything in them. So let's go and have a look at content gap, because that's a topic that is of interest to many people. How many times someone came on my site and made a query that returned no results? So let's see what we have. First, we can see at the top here, we have filters. So what these filters do, I hope, so it's rather intuitive once you understand how reports are built. So reports are built from all these events. It's really like a pivot table if you're familiar with Excel. And I'll show you, opening a parenthesis here, in just a moment, I'll talk, in this, we'll also see how we can do data export. So export this data into an Excel spreadsheet. I know some of you really like, if you're like me and you like Excel, it's really cool to have your data in Excel and be able to really play with it. So what does this say? It says, okay, show me only event for which the query field, so the query dimension is not, so show me all the events for which the query was not blank, and for which the has result dimension, so all search result have a dimension called has search result, is false. So what this filter allows me to do is to see all the query that were made that return no result. And here we have them. So we have here the query dimension and all its possible value for the given period right here, and we have different metrics. So here we have query count and unique visit. We'll return to these filter more when we build this. We'll see how we can build this Explorer from scratch. But this is just to give you more perspective maybe. And if I click on this little icon right here, I can change what are the selected dimension. Maybe I would like to have the queries and compare them by the countries, the country they're coming from. And maybe I would like to have, in addition to query count and unit visit, I would like to have relevance index. And then I save, and then you will see that it's possible to have two dimension to chain two dimension with one another. We'll just give it. Okay, I do have a change the date. Okay, the date is good. Okay, it's a bit slow. Well, I guess I'll just let it run and return to the presentation, but don't worry, we'll just come back here. We'll come back here just a few times. So key concept to understand, number one, the period. We just saw it, and I think period is really easy to understand. It's used to display only the events that occur during a given time frame. So for example, if we have this filter here for the period, can you guess which one of these events will be displayed? Well, of course, it's event number 3 because it's the only one that matches these criteria. It's the only one that happened between May 5th and May 12th. The other one happened before that. So only this event will be available in your report. Likewise, filter. We just saw an example with query is not blank or has result is false. So the idea behind filter is, of course, to restrict the number or only to see event that matches specific criteria. Once again, let's say we create a filter that says search origin to, so the tab, so tab is, these are tabs, right? They allow you to organize your content. So if I'm asking to see only events for which the tab was demo, can you guess which one of these events will be displayed in my reports? Well, of course, only event number 1, because the two others, they don't match this criteria, so they'll be filtered out. So we can see, but the idea behind filter is that it's inclusive, and it's just including them and rejecting those that are, so it's either inclusive or exclusive, depending on how you see it. The bottom line, all the events you will see will match this exact criteria. So if we put this all together, This is just a reminder of what we just saw in the Explorer when we look at it actually on the Coveo platform. So you always start by setting your period, saying I want to see event from this period to this period. Then you might add filter. Let's say you have different search interface, or you have different tabs, like we can see here on the Coveo support portal. We have 4 different tabs. So maybe you only want to see video content, or maybe doc, or only posts from the community. So of course you can set your filter depending on what you're looking for, what type of analysis you're performing, and then you select the dimension that you want to report on. Of course, a very common one is the query dimension, just to see what are the keywords that are used and how many times they're used, what kind of click they're leading to, etc., etc. So of course, this is just one tool. You might be wondering, why these reports, they look a bit dry. Yes, of course, don't worry. We have something called dashboard, and they're much prettier, much fancier. I show you Explorer first because they're easier to understand, but once you understand this mechanic, so you choose your period, you choose your filter, then you choose which dimension you want to report on, and then the metrics you want to know about this dimension, then you can really start playing with it, and then you can start building your own dashboard. Now, speaking of filter, maybe as analysts, sometime you will probably start building, once you get really good and you understand this notion of filtering and what each of the dimension mean, you'll start wanting to build your own filter. So customized filter. You might have 6 or 7 dimension to analyze on a very narrow topic that you want to narrow down on. Of course, entering your filter each time you're building a report can be a bit time consuming and painful, and because you have to redo it each time you're building a new report. So this is why we have a feature called name filter. So name filter allows you to pre-configure to really create your own filter. You name it the way you want, and then you can reuse it in your reports over and over again. So let me just show you what I mean. So okay. So I'm going to go back into console. Okay, and we're done. See, now here I remember what I did just before leaving. I selected query and country, so 2 dimensions to report on at the same time, and now I can see each of these queries depending on which country they're coming from. So it gives me, once again, more perspective, but of course I could have done something smarter, maybe something just like this country is. Oh, if you're wondering, is it possible, what kind of logic you can have? You can have is not, contains, if you want to use a regular expression, or does not contain. So once again, no, sorry, this is not for regular expression. Is exclusively must be exactly it. Contain, it must contain this value. So these 2 one are very, very specific, and these one are a bit more loose. So closing the parenthesis, I was talking about name filter. So let's go and create one together. I'm going to add a name filter. I'm going to call it basic UA test. So let's say I would like to create a filter only to see people that are only events that are coming from my own country, from Canada, and add filter. And now I'm going to do it and. So any event will need to match both these criteria, and using a device category of smart. You see, it's smart enough to know which value it has. So simply smartphone, add filter. So of course, here I'm using, I can use multiple. So let's say I would like smartphone and personal computer. You see, now I just created a OR logic. I cannot create OR logic I could not have country is Canada or device category is smartphone or personal computer. This is an AND logic. So these two, so it will only include events that match these 2 criteria. However, inside a given criteria, like here, inside a given dimension, I can do smartphone or personal computers. Now, you might also be wondering, let's say I use city. What is this? What does this mean? Well, sometimes some usage analytic event, depending on how it's configured, usually for custom event, they might be blank, or they might have not any value in the example of query. So if someone is just pressing enter on the search page, so if someone comes here and just press enter, that's an empty query, and we want to exclude that from our usage analytics, right? So we want to exclude empty values or values that are so blank values or NA values. So this is where this one can be useful. So for example, let's say I would like also only to see queries that are not empty. So I would do query is not right? I don't want to see any query, any event that has a query that is blank or that has no value, and then I simply add it right here, add the filter. And now if I go back to my report, so once again, content gap, if I click on here, you can see that I can now use this custom filter that I made. So once again, as analysts, it can be really cool to have your own set of filter that you can use at your disposal or modify instead of building a report, adding the filters, and then you build another report, and then you have to recreate your filter. No, that doesn't scale up, right? You need to be able to access your filter whenever you want it. So that's why we have this feature of name filter. And another very important concept called permission filter. This one we're entering the realm of really controlling who can see what. So permission filter are exactly the same thing as name filter. However, they are tied to a user or a group instead than just being available for reports. So instead of instead of explaining too much, I'll show you the demo, and you'll understand right away what I mean by this. So let me jump into the demo. And what I'm going to do, a very common use case is that sometimes you want, I remember a while ago, we had someone who asked me, is it possible to exclude the data from everybody? So let's say you have a CEO, and that CEO, well, you don't want to, for some reason, the CEO of that company didn't want his usage analytics his analyst to know what he was searching for. So the question was, is it possible to exclude the CEO from any reports? The answer is yes. Let me show you how it can be done. So I'm going to come here in permission filters, and I'm going to select add a filter. So once again, basic UA secured. Okay, so let's say I want to make sure that fcote, myself, is not able to see any event from the demo page. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a dimension called origin1. The origin1 is always the name of the page. I'm going to select is not demo. Okay, so what this does, remember, this is an inclusion. This will exclude any event that doesn't match this criteria. And in this organization, I only have a single search page that is called demo. So if I have a filter like this, I will not see any data at all. And then I can assign this filter to somebody. And here you can see this is maybe more stuff for administrators, but it's important that you know about it as analysts because you're probably being the team that will set this design up. And this is really how you can control who can see what in the usage analytic data. Maybe in your organization, you're just one or two analysts and everybody has access to all the data that is generated. Or maybe you're in an organization which is really which is much stricter about who can see what type of data, so you want to restrict it, and this is how you do it. So you can select on a specific member, so maybe myself, right? Yeah. So maybe I could restrict myself of seeing the data. Or maybe I could select an entire group. So maybe I could say anybody from the user group cannot see the data from the demo page. And if I select myself, I will click on Add Identity. No, not Benjamin Carroll. I said myself. Okay. And as you can see, I can add as many people as I want in here. Select Add Filter. And now if I go back to my reports, let's say Content Gap, you see, now this filter was added automatically by the platform, and there's no way for me to remove it, even though I'm a full administrator of this org. So even though I'm an administrator and I can do anything in this organization, I'm still not able to bypass this permission filter. In the report, of course, because in real life, all I would have to do would be to come here to permission filter and just delete it. Now, maybe if we push this concept one step further, I was saying that people didn't want to see the traffic from one specific person. So what you would do with this, you would select user name is not. Maybe I'm the CEO of Coveo, but I'm not. But our CEO is called Louis Tetu. So With this filter right here, I would make sure that nobody would see traffic from Louis, so I would be deny on it to see anything that is coming from that specific user. So this is how, if you want to go this granular, if you have this kind of a specification in your organization that some people cannot see the traffic of the CEO, the chief of operation, or whatever, you could restrict it using this method right here. And you can target specific person, or you can target an entire group. So really nice feature. Once again, very cool feature to be aware of, even though you might not be the one who will implement it.
I have a quick question on this one.
Yes.
I'm with Dell. What if we want to exclude any employee, anybody within Dell organization? We don't want to see that data.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you want to exclude everybody from Dell, maybe?
Right.
Okay. From you. Oh, you want to exclude your internal traffic, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's Judy, right?
That's correct.
All right. So Judy, to go, I think for this kind of broader approach, you have another tool at your disposal. You can restrict analytics. You can set an IP range.
Oh, internal VMs. Okay.
So sorry if I went too quickly. So so you go to this gear icon right here, and then you go to analytics, and then you select internal events. So of course we do that too at Coveo. So people, especially since we have a VPN, if you have a VPN, I'm pretty sure Dell has a VPN. Right. You simply enter the address of the VPN. So any traffic coming from there will simply be excluded from the user analytic data. Of course, not to pollute. If you're using custom portal.
Because I don't want people who are doing testing to impact what's going on.
Well, that's correct. So this is one tool at your disposal.
Okay.
And of course, you can use, once again, for this specific use case, I would consider contacting your CMM, Stephen DeMillo, because you have your own dedicated one.
I'm going to be talking to him in just a minute.
All right. So you can use a secured filter, maybe if you have people who are doing testing internally, like one or two people working on Coveo doing tests, that could be a good approach. But if you want to exclude the entire company, I suggest you go with IP range, because let's face it, it would be too long to enter everybody here, since you have thousands, even tens of thousands of employees at Dell.
That's right.
It'd be much more scalable with IP address.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So pretty good question from Judy. If you have, so thank you. It's always a good, I would have skipped this feature, but thank you for the learning experience for everybody. One thing that I forgot to add to my presentation, but I promised I would show you, so I'm going to show you right now, data export. You might be wondering, Frederick, I got all of this nice data, but is there a way I can export it? Can I download it and play with it with Excel? And the answer is yes, we have a data export feature. So let me, sorry, I moved it, so it will be when we talk about reports. So let's keep that in mind. I promise I'll show you how to do a data export, but we'll see this when we talk about building reports. I don't want to steal my thunder too much, so we're going to move on to reporting, and then I'll show you how to do a data export. Okay, so in summary, just really important that you remember that events, they're tables, and they're contained, and on the right side and on the left side you have the dimension, so fix, and then you have the values. And as we saw, dimension is really what helps you build your report. Like we saw, we had this query. I'm a very visual person, so I prefer just to show it, right? So we have this table here. Oh, I forgot to delete my permission filter. Be better if I was able to see my data, right? Okay, so what you have to remember, we have the query. So this is the dimension, and dimension, how it's used is that for all it's possible, you can create a report on all the possible value of a given dimension, and then you can have metrics on the other side that will tell you more about, that will help you contextualize. So Old Man Journey was made almost 1,000 times over the course of 332 different visits, for example. So this is really how, if you understand the relationship between dimension, their values, and metrics, you will be pretty comfortable building your own stuff by yourself. So metrics are numerical value that are compiled from dimension. For example, how many times a specific keyword was entered in a query, or how many times for that keyword there was a click, that sort of stuff. And dimension, and what's really cool also about dimension is that this is really how you filter, because when you create a report, you see all the events for a given period. And then maybe you only want to see events that are coming from a specific search page and people and only from a specific country. Of course, if you're like Judy and you're working in a very large organization like Dell, it might be cool to filter to create reports on people only from North America or people from Asia, or you see that kind of pattern. So it's all up to you. But if you understand how the principle behind it is that a filter is really a dimension and a value, and you say is not, contains, does not contains, and once you understand that, you can build very complex logic with it. And of course, speaking of filters, you can create your own name filter that you can reuse over and over again, so it's much more scalable, especially when you want to build complex filtering logic instead of having to recompute it every time. And you can control who can see what, either by using the trick that I show you using permission filters. You can really filter out a thing as targeted as, I don't want people to see the data from my CEO. Or of course, if you're like Judy in a context in which you want to restrict for a much larger range, you can use IP range instead. So to make sure that you exclude traffic from your internal data. Of course, Judy, I forgot to mention, if you're using Coveo with support portals, I'm not quite familiar with the details of the Dell implementation, but you have to be careful, because if you exclude your internal IP address, maybe if you're using Coveo for support agents, that might not go well. So talk with your CSM, talk with Steven. But then again, you can use a mix of both IP range and permission filter to achieve what you're looking for. All right.
Yeah, we'll check on that. Our techs don't as a rule use it, but we're hoping to change that. So we'll see.
Okay, great. And Steven is there, literally there for you. Okay, so I hope this wasn't too hard of an introduction to the basic concept. Once again, I prefer to state the concept and maybe show you how they interact before jumping into report building, because trust me, you will see, as you will see, once you understand dimension metrics and their values and how they relate to one another, building report becomes much, much more easier. So where we are on the relevancy maturity model, so we're getting started. So now that we have a good grasp of the fundamental concept behind usage analytics and how we can leverage it, it's time to start building reports. So we have our content navigation, we have all of these events, and now we want to learn more about what our users are doing. So in this module, I'll show you how to build and modify Usage Analytics Explorer and data and dashboard. So we'll start with an Explorer because it's the easiest way to interact with your data. And then you'll see it's pretty easy. Just by looking at it, you'll be pretty comfortable. And then we'll move on to dashboard. And dashboard is what you will use 99% of the time because they're much cooler. You have a much more option and you can see lots of different dimensions at the same time, while in Explorer, you can only see one. And also in this module, but before we jump into that, we'll start by seeing the visit browser. Visit browser is very useful because it shows you the journey of a single visitor. So each of your visitors, you can see their journey as they're going through their site, what they're clicking on, and what are the events that they're firing. Then, as promised, I will show you, then we'll jump into building reports. And after that, as I promised, I will show you how to do an export. So how to take all of this data that you can have in a report and bring it into an Excel spreadsheet. Now, also, some of you might be wondering, hey, Frederick, is this possible to have some automation or to have a feed that would connect Coveo with my super fancy system, like, let's say, Tableau? The answer is yes, and you need a developer for that. We have a bunch of APIs, so if you're not familiar with the term APIs, it's just a way that the Coveo platform has a protocol that would allow it to communicate with basically any other system in a standardized way. However, of course, you need a developer to create that bridge. But it's doable. I mean, we do have Tableau, and they are exporting their own data using a custom-made API, a custom-made program, and they bind it with their own Tableau software, of course. Okay, and we'll return maybe quickly with name filters. So, as I was saying, Visit Browser, very useful tool. Reports will tell us a lot about the dimension, but they don't tell us about the journey of the visitor, right? Reports will just show us, here's a bunch of data, here's what happened, here's all the different dots, all the different dimension and different tables. However, Visit Browser, what this doesn't tell us is that, okay, but when a visitor came to my site, what did they did and in what order? And this is where the visit browser comes in. The visit browser will really tell you a visitor came in at this moment, performed these actions, and then left the page. Or to be more precise, its visit ended. So maybe a bit of a terminology before showing you the visit browser. Of course, I go in more details in intermediate, but for now, we just need to maybe position each of them. When I talk about a visit, I'm talking about someone who connects to any search page and stay there and is active. Sorry. A visit is when you connect to a page. This is a new visit. A new Coveo search page, that's a new visit. And the visit will be active as long as you are on the page and perform an action for 30 minutes. So you go on a Coveo search page, you leave, you return. Within 30 minutes, it's still the same visit. However, if you go on a Coveo page, you leave and you return for after 30 minutes, that's considered a new visit. And we'll see that when we check the visit browser. Visitor ID, that one is permanent. So when you connect on a Coveo search page, the Coveo search page will add a cookie to your browser. So really just a tiny tracker that tells you are this person, you are this visitor ID. And then when you return to the page, you will have the same visitor ID. Of course, if you clear your browser cache, use another device, use another browser, or use an anonymous session, you will not have the same visitor ID. And that's what, so it can be creating reports on visitor ID, it can be tricky. So that's why we talk more about this in intermediate analytic, but this is why usually we recommend using user ID. So user ID, when a visitor is authenticated, that visitor, like myself, fcote, fcote@coveo.com, I will be identified as fcote@coveo.com, and thus people will be able to track me even though I use a different browser or I use a different device or I connect in an anonymous session. If I'm logged in, authenticated to the platform, I'm able to be recognized wherever I access it. So more of this in the intermediate analytic class. So about the visit browser. Visit browser allows you to see each event individually, and you can access it by going to the admin console, analytics, and then visit browser. So very great to understand the journey. So let's go and have a look instead of keep talking about it. So I go here, analytics, visit browser. So let's see all the visits for today. No, for yesterday. Okay. Here they are. So just to give you some context, I'm using a tiny program that is sending random data to my, like a robot that is sending random data here. So we'll see patterns that we wouldn't normally see on a real search page. But once again, this is just to populate it with data to make it much more visual and much more fun to play with. So here we see, so each of these darker gray represent a visit. So that visit was yesterday, and it happened between 11:59:47 and almost 30 seconds. So a very, very quick visit. It came from Canada, from the province of Quebec. The person was using a Windows Chrome browser, and there's 17 event count for that visit. So let's expand it. So here we are. Here we can see the entire journey of that visitor going through each of these events. So at the top, we have the first event that the person did, and at the bottom, we have the last event that the person did. And then if we dig even further, we can have additional details about that visit. Were they anonymous? Were they using a language demo? Which page were they on? And what did they do? What was their visit ID and what was their visitor ID? Why am I showing you this? You might be wondering, well, that doesn't seem very useful, Frederick. Well, yes and no. Once you get much more familiar with reports, you'll start observing trend. You'll start having question about, why am I seeing this? Why am I seeing a query that, for example, I'm on Dell and someone is searching from computer and there's no result. That doesn't make any sense. But then maybe if you will isolate, you will create your own filter to try to recreate this problem where query is computer and has no result. And then you will see that the people who made the query computer was in fact on a search interface that is internal and use like 20 different facets. So maybe, yes, in that case, when you're using lots of filters on an interface that is internal only, maybe if you search for computer, you'll get no result. Okay, this is a very, very extreme case, but the idea is the same, is that sometimes you will see things in your report that don't make sense. And the only way to really figure out what they mean, to get to the bottom of it, is really coming here, looking at the data that you will see from these that you will see here. And of course, how you do it is that you start by recreating your filters here, and then you will see the different visit. For example, different visit for which query is computer and return no results. And then you will start digging and say, oh, okay, that person was not using the correct page, or that person used so many facets, so many filters that's why there was no result. So very useful tool to get to the bottom of things. Of course, a bit more advanced, but then again, I prefer, right, this class is about the toolbox. I'm showing you all the tools, and I'll let you ask your question, experiment if you want to learn more about it. And of course, we go a bit more details in intermediate analytic. Once again, I know I'm quoting intermediate analytic a lot, but that's because it's my baby. I created it based working with the CSM like Stephen DeMillo, Judy. So people, to really get people more context about everything. So as I promised, we will start by building a tiny explorer just to give you an idea of how it works and really giving you the feeling of it. So we already show you events, so I will jump straight into the demo instead. All right, so I'm going to build an explorer. I'm going to recreate this explorer that we used together. So the content gap explorer, I'm going to recreate it with you just to show you how easy it is to create explorers. So first of all, you come here and add, and you go, and we'll select a blank explorer. I'm going to select basic analytics. So now I'm in edit mode because I got this big orange save button right here. So first thing I want to do, of course, I want a report that will show me the queries that have no results. So obviously I don't want user ID, I want query. So I'm gonna click on this little icon here, and instead of the dimension I will select query instead. And activity, not really useful. Query count, very useful. Click count, very useful, but then no, click count doesn't make sense because people, if there's no result, they won't be clicking on it. But maybe visit, unique visit. So how many times someone came to this page and made this query. So that's what the unique visit means. So now this will update my table. And while we're at it, I will also add the filters. So I'm going to select has results. So all search event, you can see here, has result is only for search events. Has result is false. And now I will update my table. But of course, in this case, I don't have any query that are empty. But like I said, it's good practice to exclude blank queries because sometimes people go on your page. Maybe they accidentally click or they generate an empty query. So it's better also to do this. Query is not blank or NA. So now we added our two filter to make sure that we'll only see query that return no results and that are not blank. Finally, we might want to edit this one right here. So maybe we'd like also to add, so this is the table for this little graph right here. Maybe we'd like to have another one, which would be unique visits, just to see the trend. And there you have it. So as you can see, very simple to build, very simple to use. And when you understand which dimension mean what, it's very easy to create your reports and on whatever you want. Now, something important about reports as analysts, if you're working in a team, you will see here that I see all the reports, and that's because there's no foldering. In the Coveo platform right now, there's no foldering. So there's no way really to really organize your report in folders. So these are the folder for the marketing team. This is the folder for the web analytic team, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no way to segment report in folders. So instead of that, we have reports permission. Reports permission allows you to control who can see your report. Maybe it's only yourself, maybe it's everybody, or maybe custom, a mix of specific user or specific group. So once again, this is kind of a way to organize your content. So if you have reports that are unique to your team, maybe because we don't have foldering system, maybe simply include them inside a permission filter. So let me just show you what I mean by this. If I return into my basic analytic explorer, I go here, and then I can say manage report access. So I can select only me. So of course, if this is a report that you don't want to show to the rest of your team, or you don't want to pollute the report list, you set it only to yourself. This one will be everybody who can see usage analytic data. So bottom line, every analyst, every member of your team, everyone who has access to Coveo Analytics. Or you can go custom. maybe you want to select it only for the administrator group, at identity, or only to yourself. One caveat right here, if I was to remove myself, I would no longer have access to the report. Yeah, I know it sounds silly, but don't do it, because the report will just be there, but nobody will know it exists. It will like be in the void. So if I was to do something like this, the report will simply be gone and inaccessible. And I don't even think that our cloud team has a way to recover it, because of course we don't have access to your organization for obvious security reason, right? You're the master of your organization. We don't have access to this. So be careful if you use custom. Always make sure that you have at least yourself or someone when you want to set the report permission to custom. So as promised, I just show you Explorer, and now I'm going to show you what you will use 99% of the time. So dashboard. Dashboards are much cooler because, as we can see here, much more color. You can have different graphs. You can have a time series. You can have table. You can have pie chart. You can have 3D pie chart. You can have a lot of different stuff to make your report much more interesting to look at, and also much more interesting to interact with, and also giving you more insight. So how dashboard works is that each of these things that are in the dotted line, these are called cards, and you simply put your cards where you want them inside your dashboard. The layout is very intuitive. So let's go and have a look at a dashboard. And I'm also going to show you how to create one. So creating a dashboard from blank. Just give me one. Okay, so we go into dashboards, and we'll select this dashboard here that comes out of the box with Coveo. So so as we can see here, much more lively, much more interesting to interact with than a simple than simply using an Explorer. So we have multiple things, and we can see it's much more visual. It's much more. I prefer it, and you will see in 99% of the time this is also what you will prefer. Now, what I would invite you to do, and this is really how I personally learn how to master this tool, how to master usage analytics. What I invite you to do is that simply rip out. If you want to learn how to build your report, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to do a bit of cheating at the same time, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep this report open, okay? And if you want to look how each of these tables is built, you simply click here and you'll have it, right? So I'm going to rebuild this and sorry, I forgot to mention. What's really cool about dashboard also is that here we have tabs. So in this view, I see like global activity, top tabs, query, top document, how many clicks, how many queries, how many visits. And then I got these nice pie chart about device and countries. But then I can change. That's really what's cool about dashboard, is that you can have multiple tabs, and on each tab you can see different things. And all of this is entirely customizable. So this is why I say you'll spend most of your time in dashboards. And you can see here, and here's the content gap, approximately exactly the same reports that we just saw together. So how to see queries that have no result, except this one gave me much more insight. I got a rectangle graph, I got a table, I got 2 time series, I got a lot of stuff. So you might be wondering, hey, Frederick, I was just wondering, is this possible to export these nice reports in PDF? Not yet. I know we have a lot of requests for this, so eventually I guess our developers will build a feature that will allow you to export any of these nice graph into a PDF, or maybe a spreadsheet or anything. But as of now, we don't have anything. So maybe a print screen, but don't worry. And if you say no, that's unacceptable, I don't want to use print screen, well, I will also show you, as promised, after I show you how to build a dashboard, I will show you how to do a data export. So how you can get all the data you see here, how can you get this data inside a spreadsheet? So maybe you want to build your own, so I'll show that in just a minute. But for now, let's build a dashboard from scratch. So let's go here, and I'm going to add blank dashboard. And I'm going to call it basic UADB for dashboard, of course. And once again, I invite you, if you're not familiar with this process of creating dashboard, I really invite you to try it out yourself. It's a lot of fun, and it's really helped you put into perspective these important stuff, the things that I was talking about, notably the relationship between dimension and their values. So we'll start by adding, so here's my tab, and I will rename it, whoops. Yes, I want to delete it. So first of all, I will name this tab Activities. Okay, so first thing we want to add this nice time series here with click count, query count, and unique visit. So to add a time series, like I said, everything here is a card. And when you click on add a card, you see you have a lot of different choices with our very cool packed bubble chart that I won't show you in this class, but if you want to try it out, just go ahead. It's really amazing. Okay, so I'm going to select a time series. And for this time series, I want two things. I want click counts. Whoops. I want query counts, common metrics, and unique visits. Click on add a card. And now there you have it. Very pretty straightforward. If you want to give a name to it, we can say the name of this entire section is activities, and the name of this one is time series. All right, as you can see, I can simply rearrange, reshape it. It's kind of a fixed layout, however. All right, so we have our time series, and next on the step, we have these three tables, so top tab, top queries, and top documents. The name is pretty obvious. The tab that is the most used, the top queries, so the queries that are the most common, and the document that are the most oftenly clicked. So let's add them. Now, I mean, you see, I can have different section. I could create a new section, but I will stay in this activity section right here. And I will add a table. And this table will be on origin level 2, right? This is the tab. You have to trust me on this one. And I'm looking for the query count. How many times was a query made on each of these tabs? Now, we can see it's here. What's really cool, I'm going to call it top tab. And if you want to maybe put it underneath, you see here we have a tiny icon, and when you hover over it, it becomes a hand. So you can simply drag and drop it right here where you want it. All right, so we have two other tabs to make, top queries and top documents. So let's go and do that. And that will create another table. This one will be for the query dimension. And once again, we want to have the query count. And this will be top queries. So drag and drop. Okay, so now you see, well, maybe Frederick, it's a bit too compact. So let's expand it a bit. Okay, now we're saying something very interesting. We see that blank query is the top queries with 20,000, with 20K, really 10 times ahead of the closest query. Obviously, that's not something you want in your report. Obviously, there's a lot of blank queries that are made on an interface, and you usually want to filter them out. So of course, now that we're familiar with filtering, I could create a filter here, right? I could say query is not blank. However, here's a nice trick. If I click on the edit panel, I could add a filter on the card itself. So this is why I say that dashboards are much more flexible. You can even inside a single card have a different filter than you have on the entire dashboard itself. So in this case, it would be very useful to have query is not blank or NA. So, and we save. And now we have something nice, much more relevant for us as analysts. Next on the list, we have the top document, and we have here, and we have these two. But what is this? What does this mean, right? We don't really know what's the title of each of these columns. Maybe we would like something a bit more customized, right? So maybe you're not familiar with this terminology. Maybe you want to make this explicit. Maybe you want to see that this is really the tab, and this is the query count. So if you want to display your column's title, you simply go to Edit, and you select an option columns headers. And now you see, we know what's the dimension and what's the name of the metrics. So speaking of which, we also need to add the top documents. So top documents are based on the document title dimension. So it's the title of the document that was clicked. And what we're interested in is, of course, click count. And it will also be nice to know on average where was these documents in the search result, because that can be very relevant for us. And we'll add column header. And there we have it. We'll say top documents, and we'll drag and drop it here, and maybe expand it a bit. And we probably will want to rearrange them with the click count. So as you can see, if you click on the header, you can rearrange them as any way you like. So if you want to sort them by average click rank, you click here. Or if you want to rearrange it by click count, you simply click on the column, and you see here you have this arrow saying where how you're performing your sort. And finally, two new things. We'll add these two pie charts, one from country and one from the device. So if we come back here, add a card, we simply select pie chart, and we want a pie chart on the country dimension. And the metrics we want to use for this one will be the visit, of course. And we select here, select visits. You can have a donut if you prefer. I'll just leave it that way to make it exactly the same. Visit by country. Maybe you want to make it a bit larger, so I will restrict this one a bit further. So as you can see, it's a flexible layout, so sometimes you have to fight with it just a bit. Maybe something like this, and then I have to rearrange. So like I said, sometimes you need to play a bit with it, so I'm going to make it much bigger than on the original just to show you that sometimes you have to fight with it a bit. Okay, and let's say, and the principle is exactly the same for this new one, but maybe sometime you just created this table, and instead of going back, clicking on add a card, and you start a process over again, maybe you just want to duplicate it, right? You want another pie chart, so why not duplicate it? So duplicate. But of course, we still have visit by country. This is not what we want. We want visit by devices. And of course, we won't be using the same dimension to do this. So we go in edit, and instead of country, we use devices categories, we save, and now we'll have our new pie chart. Excellent. So very important to remember, I am currently in edit mode. And how do I know this? Is because my save button is in orange. So if I click on save, now I just save my report. And now if I do any modification to this, it will be overwritten next time I reload the page. For example, if I come here and I say, instead of showing me the visit, I want to show me the manual query count. Click on save. And then I get out. As you can see, didn't change anything because I was not in edit mode. So if you want to make a permanent change to your dashboard, you go to edit mode. If you only want to rearrange something or maybe dig deeper on that metrics and play a bit with it, you can do it right here. And now you probably get that this is an Explorer, right? So you can, this is why I say a dashboard are much better than Explorer, because each time you have a card like this, you can simply view it inside an Explorer. But of course, know the distinction. If I click on here, explore data, but if I switch to edit mode, now I don't have this explore data option anymore. I got edit, copy, and delete. So that's it for building dashboards. So I hope you're seeing that all I did is really you can try it yourself. I mean, if you want to create new dashboard by yourself and see how they work, simply take the default summary dashboard and play with it, what you can do with the different dimension you can use, the different how everything is shaped. Or if you have reports from your CSM and you would like to understand them better, simply read them apart using the same principle, using exactly the same thing that I just showed you here. It's very easy. You might be wondering, hey, I got this activity tab, why we're not seeing it? Well, if there's only one tab in the dashboard, it will collapse, not showing it. But let's say I create another one and I call it dummy 1, and I save. You see, now I got activity and dummy 1. Dummy 1, there's nothing, and it will invite me to edit, to add new cards. And here I got the dashboard that I just created. If I go back now, I got this basic QA dashboard and this summary dashboard. Oh, and as you probably have guessed, these are, you can see all Explorer or just dashboards. Oops. Okay, so that was it for blank dashboard. I hope you I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have question about maybe something a bit more more advanced, just let me know. But now, speaking of dashboard, and since I said that you can't really export it in PDF, you cannot save it as PDF, you have to take a screenshot. It might not be optimal for some of you. So let me talk about data exports. So the Coveo platform allows you to export all of your usage analytic data into a spreadsheet format with 2 different tools. So you can download it directly using the download button, or you can create a data export schedule that will and select the data that you want and create and then download it. And you also have the option to create a schedule that will generate a new package to download every period, so maybe every week, every month, or whatever. Of course, alternatively, if you want something a bit more automated, you can also use our platform, the APIs of the Coveo platform to really export the data automatically for you and feed it directly into your system. Now, obviously, this is an analysis class. I'm not going to go into how to create your own custom data exporter from the Coveo platform, but know that it is available. And if some of you are interested, maybe you know how you're using Google Spreadsheet and you would like to do API calls to the Coveo platform, just let me know. We have it's called a Swagger documentation. If you're into that depth of knowledge and you want to play with the API. Oh, question from Rob. Can you export aggregated group data from the API? Rob, from top of my head, I'm not sure. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask our API teams, and I will come back to you with the answer tomorrow. Sorry, from top of my head, I don't have the answer to that one. But yes, you can group data. You can group data. So let me just show you how it works and know that everything I'm showing you right now, you can do it with an API. Okay, so data exports. Oops, sorry. Data exports. So when I was saying you have 2 options, really. First option is that you have all of this data right here, and you would like to have the data that is contained in this report. No, sorry, it's not about dashboard. No. Sorry, so many things in my mind right now. Okay, let's say you have this dashboards and you would like to export, let's say you cannot export the entire dashboard. However, you can export each card individually. So if you go to explore data, you have this little icon right here. You see, it's very subtle, but it's right here. So if I click on it, it will automatically generate a CSV file that will contain all of the data that I have right here. And if I open it, okay. Sorry about this. There you go. So here we have it. We have the document title. So that was the dimension that I selected with the different metrics that I wanted, which were array click run and document views. So that's one way of doing it. Of course, maybe you created your dashboard and you say, that would look really nice in an Excel spreadsheet. I want to dig a bit deeper. You can do it that way. Now, if you want something more, maybe more custom, maybe larger data set, you can use data export feature directly. So let me just delete these two dummy. Okay, so you have exports and schedules. What schedules do really is simply do an export. You time it, right? You simply say, I want this data export to be run every month, every week, every day, etc. So what's an export look like? Very simple. You click on Add, you select Export, and then you will select first thing for which period, right? Which period do you want your data for? So in this case, I'm selecting for about a month. And as you can see, my robot has been pretty busy with almost 500,000 search events, more than 500,000 clicks, and with nearly half a million of different keywords. Of course, they were repeated over and over again. So let's say I want, so how this works really is that each event will be aligned, and all the columns is where this one right here, filter dimension to export. This is where you set your columns. So in this case, I would select all of the columns because all of them are selected. And I don't know, Rob, if this is what you mean by a aggregated or group data, because you can say, I only want to see search event, and I don't want to have all the columns. I only want to have, let's say, browser, city, and country. And then, of course, it will be much lighter to generate, because if I was to generate a report in all of these, we would get hundreds of megabytes worth of data. And of course, on large implementation, like let's say Dell, that number will be even higher. One thing that you might be wondering about this use dimension display name, you remember the display name is this? And if you don't select this, you will get the API name. So to make your life easier, make sure you always select use the dimension, the display name, and then you can simply select the columns in your report. And if we go back to what I already have, here's I have the document title, and these are the column that I had selected on my card. Would be exactly the same principle from this window. So let's say I add this export. So it will be running because, of course, the platform must gather all of this data. So depending on the size, it might take a few seconds or a few minutes, sometimes a few hours, depending, of course, on the size of the data set. Total and summary information rather than just events. Oh, okay, Rob, thanks. So thank you for the precision. I will ask this to our analyst team, because on top of my head, I'm not quite sure it's doable. But then again, I am far from omniscient, and the platform is really sophisticated. That's why we're a team. So I'll look for this, Rob. So here we can see that the status was complete. It's about 50 megabytes in size. And let's say I would like to rerun this exact report. So I could simply so in the case of, so exports is like a one-time, and schedule is you can select, it's exactly the same, it's exactly the same interface when you want to add a schedule, except that you can simply select at which frequency you want it to run. Do you want it for the last day, the last week, or the last month? So when do you want it to start? Let's say you want it to start on Mondays. What kind of event do you want to include? Do you want to receive an email notification? So let's say yes, so I would receive, so you can select who will receive the notification about, hey, your report is ready. Now note that all of this feature will do is that it will run this export and put it here. So it won't send it to you by email for obvious reason, and it won't really send you a link for that to download it. You need to come back to the Coveo platform behind the security and click on download to get to extract your data. Excellent. Okay. So that was it for data export. So Ram asked a pretty good question. So is it possible to have total summary information rather than just events in data exports? In the export, so Ram, I know the answer for the feature I just showed you. No, it's not. You will have all the events in the column. So you'll have the raw data. Now for total and summaries information, I will ask the developer team. So maybe, of course, it would be possible for a programmer to program something so that in the API call, there will be some processing of the data before it's being sent to you. So I will look out for answer for this. Oh, a quick note about Coveo for Sitecore and Coveo for Salesforce, if some of you are using it. So just know that usage analytics is enabled by default. I haven't talked about it yet, but now, I think now is a good time now that we know more about reportings. So as soon as you implement Coveo, if you're using the Coveo JavaScript interface, usage analytics will be enabled. This is why we recommend to always use the Coveo framework. So we have a JavaScript framework to build our page. Maybe at your level as analyst, it's not as important. However, you have to know this. If your partner or your developers are not using the Coveo framework to build your search interface, ask them some very serious questions, because we have I think now the team is 7 members. We have 7 people dedicated full-time into building our open source. So it's open source, the open source JavaScript framework that allows you to build search interface with Coveo. And I'm just putting this parenthesis here because I used to work in support, and I used to receive a lot of calls from angry analysts saying, "Where's my data?" And sadly, the answer we had to provide them with was, "Sorry, sir, ma'am, your developer didn't use the Coveo framework, so they will have to build the logic to call our own API to send your own analytic data, and that's a lot of work. So you might be paying 3, 4, 5-fold what you." So you may be finding 5 times what it would have cost you if you just use the Coveo JavaScript framework. So don't worry, if you use Coveo for Salesforce, Coveo for Sitecore, the Coveo framework is already embedded in there, so you don't have to do anything. And in addition to this, I also show you sooner in the presentation how to check to make sure that you are using Coveo on your page. So remember, we saw how to check a usage analytic event going out. If you don't see that, you're probably not using Coveo Analytics, or it's not enabled. So someone, most likely a developer, didn't do something right. So you are now equipped to tell them. So in summary, we have two types of report, dashboards and explorers. But once again, dashboard is really what you will use because they're much more flexible, powerful, and each cards is in fact an explorer. So cards are what we saw. We have different, and we can play. We have a lot. We have some fancy one that just came out that are called bubble charts. That will, well, let's go and have a look. I think it would be instructive for everybody if we can have a look at this new feature about bubble charts. So go to edit, add a card. So it's beta, so it might not. So your experience may vary. So let's say I would like to have query and using query counts instead. I won't, and I will add a filter saying query is not blank NA. So I guess select one dimension. Yeah, would be a good idea. So if I select this bubble chart, well, that's pretty cool. That's pretty visual. It's exactly the same thing as having a table, except you can see all of these bubble. So it's much more visual to see. And we also have what's called computed calculated metrics. But then these one I go into, I don't want to do it here because we need to set up a few things. Oh, but a good question from Mahesh. Okay, just let me copy paste that because of course I will send a response to all query. Okay, how to exclude recommendation query but include click count from all interface, how to build a report for a single site in multi-site instances and specific external sources, and is there a standard for query count, click count, which we may say that my site is performing well. Wow, Mahesh, thank you for this opportunity. So a lot of great questions coming from Mahesh. Let's see what we can find out. So question number one, how do you exclude recommendation query but include click count on all interface? So, as of now, we are done for the day. So I've pushed all the content that we have to cover for today, and tomorrow we'll go with query pipeline and machine learning. So I think now is a great time to ask your question if you have any, and I will show you something that is extremely useful as analyst. And since we have the opportunity, let me just show it to you. So when you go on the online help of Coveo and you go to usage analytics, you go to dimensions, and this will be pretty much your reference with the Coveo platform when you're working with usage analytics. Because Mahesh is asking, okay, I got recommendation. How can I filter them out? How can I know what was a recommendation is really something that is generated by the machine learning by the machine learning feature that will recommend result to people. So how can you create a report that will only show me recommendation or exclude them from my reports? Now, in this organization, I don't have any recommendation, but let's say I would like to set it up. So what I suggest you is that you come here, you do a Control F, and you select, because I don't know everything, right? So let's see. Mahesh was asking about search. Okay, search cause. This is what interests you. So remember, every time you do something on a Coveo search interface, that triggers a search. If I click here, that's a search. If I click here, that's a search. So, and of course, this is why we have search cause. Search cause allows us to distinguish between these different types of events. So in this case, you see, we have a search cause that is called recommendation, and you have different one. But let's say we keep it simple. Let's say you don't want to see events that are caused by recommendation. So how you do it, you go here, you create a filter that will be such as search cause is not recommendation, add filter. Of course, in this particular case, that won't do anything because I don't have recommendation, but I hope that you're seeing the idea here. This is how you would do it with this dimension and this value in the dimension. And once again, this page will be your best friend for this kind of question, right? How do I exclude this? How do I exclude when my search page loads, like this one right here? Or how do I include only things that are, let's say, recommended by the Omnibox? So Omnibox Analytics, from memory, this is the one when you have query suggest and you want to include or exclude query suggest. So really, this place right here will tell you most of these questions. So first question, how do I exclude recommendation? That's how you do it. Question number 2, how to build report for a single site in multi-site instance. So I'm guessing that what Mahesh is asking is that, let's say I'm working at Coveo and I got 5 different sites, Coveo.com, online help, support portal, developers. So in this multi-site context, how do I make sure that I only want to watch Coveo support? I only want to see data from Coveo support or Coveo.com. How do I do that? Well, Mahesh, once again, pretty good question. So, and I will refer to you to the, once again, the reference, the Bible. No, I don't want to use the term Bible. Sorry for those who are religious in the room. That this is not correct for me. I apologize. So this is your reference manual. This is really the reference guide. So now we're talking about the search interface. So is there a dimension that tells me where the query comes from? What is the name of the search page from which this query is coming from? Yes. And that dimension is called origin 1. And we can see here the name of the search hub, a group of search interface from which the search event is coming from. So best practices will say that your developers are smart enough to put a different origin 1 on each of your search interface. Obviously, if they don't, have a conversation with them. I recently heard of a case with a pretty big customer that I won't name, for which their developer, they had 5 different sites, and each time the name of the site was website. So, and they had like an e-commerce site, customer portal. They had like 5 different interfaces with very different audience, and each time it was website. So of course, when the customer success came in and they say, okay, what's this website? And the analyst was, well, I'm not sure. I can't really differentiate them. So Mahesh, that's a pretty good conversation to have with your developers. Make sure that they use a different origin 1 on each of your page. So how you would do, so obviously I'm pretty sure I already steal the answer, right? If I want to report on only a single origin, a single search page, let's say Coveo.com, I would go like this. Origin 1 is Coveo.com, of course, if my developer program it that way, but this is how I would do it. So right now, if we look at the combined filter that I have, of course, now I won't have any data because I don't have a search hub that is called Coveo.com. But then in this case, I would have search, won't see any recommendation, and I won't see any, and I will only see things that are coming from the hub Coveo.com. And finally, third question from Mahesh, is there any standard for query count, click count, which say that my site is performing well? Ooh, tricky one, Mahesh, tricky one. Yes, there are. And I can give you a quick rundown, but then again, I would say this is what I have in mind for advanced analytics. Once you're really familiar with this filtering and you're able to navigate, but bottom line, Mahesh, let me give you that. I'll give you maybe some hints. And for the rest, I really strongly suggest that you go and talk with your customer success manager. I'm pretty sure I know from which company you are, so I don't want to give any name here. But you have a customer success manager. Just go ask them. If you don't know how to contact that person, just let me know. I'm pretty sure you have a customer success manager. So Mahesh was asking, how is it possible to know that my search interface is doing well? Well, with these dashboards, it might be a little hard to tell, but of course, there's some things that you have to look out for. First of all, how many content gap do you have, right? If you have a lot of queries that don't have any answers, well, that's a pretty good sign that you're not doing so well. We can see here the content gap is pretty constant, 50,000 per day. Of course, this is dummy data, but this is still a pretty good indication. The thing that you really want to look out for, average click rate. So on average, where did the people click on the document? We see here we have 9.9. That means that people on my search interface, they on average for all search, they have to scroll down to number 9 to click on something. That's terrible, right? We want these 3 to be the most. We want this click rank to be in best practices, say about 3, right? Higher than 3 is really your golden target for this one. And click-through over time. Click-through is really when you search for something, when a search is followed by a click. And the ratio between the two is considered a click-through. So of course, if people do a lot of queries and they do, let's say they do 10 queries and they click on one document, that's considered a click-through of 10%. And that's very bad. a good click through is usually above 60 or even 70%. Of course, may vary over time, depends on the interface. There's a lot of things that you can do. But as a rule of thumb, you want your click through to be over. But even there, we pre-program things to tell you. So 70% is pretty good. Usually best of the class, best of our client are usually around 80%, but there's a lot of work to get to 80%. So click through, click rank, the relevance index, that's an important metric, but it requires, I don't think I can summarize it simply here. But bottom line, the relevance index will tell you this query given some parameters, but if you hover over it, it's a combination of click rank, click through, click count. So these three data that I just mentioned. So the higher it is, the best. So in this case, we have a very, very relevant query, because what this means is that usually when that query is made, people click a lot. There's a high click through to it, or it has a very high query count. So it's a query that is done often, and often when this query is made, there's people who are clicking through it. So once again, Mahesh, this is a very quick rundown, but once again, when you work with your CSM, you'll get more sense. And to give you an idea, content gap is also a big problem. So before we talk about these nice metrics, average click and click through, what you want to show off, really, usually where you get the biggest bang for the buck is just by solving these content gaps, right? Why do I have queries that return no results? And there's a few reasons for that. And once again, if you're interested in intermediate analytics, the topic is how to find and how to resolve and what can cause content gap. And you will see it's a bit more complicated than it looks. But here's the big idea. If exactly the same idea, the same example that I use for Dell. If people go on Dell, if people at Dell see a query computer that return no result, what happens? Well, most likely someone made a query and added tons of filters, so this is why computer returned no results. So of course, if you had 20 different filters, eventually you won't get anything from any possible queries, which of course makes sense. So to summarize, check your content gap, and then relevancy, you have average click rank, click through, and relevance index. This is the bread and butters of a customer success manager. And if you work with them, you will see there's much more to it than my simple explanation. So Mahesh, thank you for this learning opportunity for everybody. I wouldn't have not gone so far in this training, not because I don't want to, but I'm a demand-driven guy. So if you have demand, if you have other types of question, just ask them. We still have a few more minutes. Anybody? You can talk also. You can use the chat box, or you can ask it vocally. No problem. Don't be shy.
Yeah, Frederick, my share. So I have one more question. So this click-through, I have a huge query count, but my click count is very less. So, and that is happening because of recommendations. So how can I, overcome that?
Mahesh, I'm really sorry, but for this, I would need to go into your org and look at the data with you to really, because it's a very complex topic. I can give you the big picture. Like I said, this is dummy data. I don't have your data. So bottom line, yes, I think you have a good starting point, trying to filter out, those that come from recommendation, filter them out to see how am I doing when I'm not using a recommendation. So the trick I showed with search cause is not recommendation. That could be a good way. And then understanding why people are not clicking on one thing. This is why we have a customer success service, because it requires someone who go into with you, look at your data, and make sense out of it. It's a full-time job, right? But once again, if you have question, I can put you in contact with your CSM.
Sure, yeah. And one last question is, can we export the charts from here?
No, like I said, you can't export the chart. You could do a copy paste, and don't worry, we're receiving this request a lot to be able to export that in PDF, for example. So I guess you could do a Control P, maybe shape it, but that wouldn't be. You see, it's pretty ugly. We're working on that. We don't have something in Coveo, maybe a plugin or something, new and print screen or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for it.
All right. Well, thanks to you for sharing this with everybody. Was there any other question?
I have a quick question just regarding the PowerPoint deck. Do we get that via email at the end of the second session, or is
Oh,
that something we have to request?
oh no, no, no. You should be able to download it in a. Well, I put it in a PDF document. Would you prefer a PowerPoint?
No, either one is fine. It's just that the PDF that I downloaded that came in the email was simply the agenda. I didn't actually
Oh,
get the rest of it.
oh yes, yes, you're correct. Kimberly, yes, I will add it to the follow-up email, and I also just pasted it in the chat box.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much.
Can you just make sure you have access to it?
Yep, I can
Okay,
access it
okay,
on Google
excellent.
Drive.
Excellent. Because I would have used the same link in the email, so I didn't want to send a bad link twice. Thank you, Kimberly. Any other last minute question? No? All right, everybody. Well, in this case, thank you for attending this session. We will meet again tomorrow at the same time for the second part when we'll talk about query pipeline and machine learning. If you have questions, and of course, tomorrow morning, I will send you the recording of this session, so you'll be able to watch it again on YouTube player. We're still working on a better delivery method, so you will, and of course, an answer to all the questions that were asked by Rob and by Mahesh. And also, Rob, I will look out for this question about information aggregation to have total and summaries instead of just the raw data. So thank you, everybody, for attending, and we'll meet again tomorrow at the same time. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
That's right.